Seriously? That's right. Yeah, I see it. I see it. Now I just got it.
Okay. Okay. I will.
He didn't say it to my face.
Good afternoon. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Thank you so much for everybody coming today. We really appreciate it. Sorry for the time shift. Please. Okay. Sorry for the time shift. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we're trying to work around. Really appreciate that you're all here. There's going to be a recording of this whole thing available in all the usual places that recordings are. For anybody that's online, there's a Q&A button where you can put in questions. For anybody here, just raise your hand and we'll do the best that we can with that. I'm Dave. I'm one of the EMTs here. I'm relatively new to this organization. I've been here for about a year and a half, and I've been an EMT since 2004. And we'll give it to the chief to get going.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here. So I'm Meg Rose. I'm the chief of Lima Ambulance, and I hate public speaking. So this is not my favorite thing to do today, but I'm really passionate about this. And I hope that I can help show you that why I think that keeping an ambulance in Lima is something that's really important. Sorry, I'm really... Do you have a microphone? I do not have a microphone. I will try and speak up as much as I can. We can also talk forward if we need to. But I do apologize. I'll be as loud as I can. So yeah, my goal today is just to tell you about why I think that keeping an ambulance here in Lima is important. But first I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I became an EMT when I was a senior in high school. I feel that volunteering and being part of EMS is just so important. And, I've dedicated many years of my life. I did take a break when my children were small because it's really hard to jump up and run out for emergency calls when you got babies in the house. But I came back around after I ran into a situation where a woman collapsed in front of me and ended up doing CPR in a parking lot. And I was like, oh, I missed this. I missed giving back this way. So I came back around to EMS, joined back up to the agency, and then started working in leadership in around 2000 and 2001. So that's kind of the story of me. And now we'll get a little bit more about what's going on with the ambulance. Dave's my tech support because I'm not good at tech support. Yep. Oh, yes. If you need the bathrooms, you're going to exit out this door here. There's the bathrooms are just right outside that space. So you need that.
Take down the air now.
Turn the air up just so you're...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I turned the air up because it was getting warm in here. So hopefully that will make it so you can hear me better.
Is that better?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, like I said, today we're going to talk about why Lima having EMS here is important. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the different solutions that have come up throughout discussion in the past year and why the challenges that I see with those solutions and then what I think could be a solution. I'm open to creativity. I'm open to other ideas. I've tried a variety of different things to try and create more staffing here at a volunteer level and try and come up with different fundraising strategies. But at this point, I've kind of hit a wall and I want to try and find out if we can get something that's sustainable that we can put in action that's going to keep this ambulance here long term. So one of the things that I think is really important is keeping an ambulance in Lima. Keeping an ambulance here in Lima makes a difference because we're talking about response time. When there is a critical incident, when someone is having respiratory emergency, if someone has critical bleeding, if there's a cardiac arrest, time does matter. But even if you think about it, let's say it wasn't a critical call. Let's say it was someone who fell down and they broke their arm. That might not be life or death, but it does make a difference in the grand scheme of things if somebody arrives there within the first 10 minutes or somebody arrives there in the first 20 to 30 minutes. Pain and stress, all of that just builds up. And I can tell you from my personal experience, when years ago we called the ambulance, when my brother had a seizure, in my head, I thought it took the ambulance 45 minutes to get there, 30 to 45 minutes. In my head, I was like, they're never coming. It just feels so long in that time frame between when you call 911 and someone gets there. I know for a fact it didn't take them that long. They were there within the first 10 to 15 minutes. But when you're dealing with that type of stress, every minute feels like longer. So if we were not to keep an ambulance in Lima, if we were to move to a more centralized plan of using county-based services to provide the ambulance here in Lima, here's just a little bit of information about how long it would take to get somebody here. If the ambulance is in Avon, to get into the center of Lima, that will take about 10 minutes. If they're coming from Mount Morris, that's 24 minutes. If they're coming from Dansville, that's 34 minutes. And then thinking from there, I'm just talking about getting to the center of Lima. I'm kind of talking about like the ambulance-based location or down to into the center. If you're going down to South Lima Road, it's 10 minutes from here. If you're heading out to Pond Road, that's 7 minutes. And if you're heading up to Eidson, that's 6. So we just have to keep in mind that if we are concerned about getting people there quickly, then we have to keep timing in mind. Okay, so this is a little bit more, I like data. So there's lots of graphs in here, lots of data. This one here, I'll just go over it so everyone can see here. We're talking about calls that are happening in Lima. This LVA, that's us. That's Lima Volunteer Ambulance. We have someone on scene within 7.9 minutes. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it's a little bit later, but it's 7.9 minutes that we've got somebody at your house, okay? When other agencies come in to cover for us, on average, it's taking them 16.5 minutes to get to us. When we have 2 calls in the district at the same time, this means our on-duty crew already got sent somewhere, but another call comes in, there's another emergency. When our crews are jumping out of their bed, not prepared to be running, or jumping up from the dinner table to fill in, it's taking us about a minute longer on average. And it's a little bit shorter when it comes into for what it's been for 15 minutes for when they're coming in on those calls. Again, we got to keep in mind that these are averages. So the data isn't always, when we come down here, we look at that total other agencies coming into our district. That's where we land. Okay. And when we go outside of Lima and we're responding to mutual aid calls, it's taking us about 11.3 minutes. So, this here is a chart that I put in the end of the year report for last year. These are all the calls we missed last year. This is times when Lima Ambulance didn't have a crew and somebody else had to cover for us. When we don't have a crew, we call the 911 dispatch center and we tell them to take us off the board or unstatus. Those are the words we use. It basically means that the 911 center, when they're looking at what's available, we show as unavailable. Okay. So if we're unavailable, then when an emergency happens, they're going to simultaneously dispatch Lima just in case, because sometimes we pull it off. Sometimes we scramble and we get a crew together and we cover the call anyway. But so they will dispatch us simultaneously with a mutual aid agency. That is how it works. So in these cases, all of these cases, they dispatched us and a mutual aid agency at the exact same time. And then when we weren't available, other agencies covered it. So just looking at this graph here or this chart here, you can kind of see these are the priority levels. So a lower priority is a less significant injury. And it gets up to the ones and the twos. Those are more significant illnesses or injuries. And you can take a look at where the response times are. I highlighted the ones with the longer response times. You can certainly say, oh, look, there's a priority one right there. And they got there within 10 minutes. And that's awesome. And I'm glad that they did. But historically, we're seeing patterns where it's not the mutual aid company's fault, but they're not stationed here. They're stationed wherever it is to best serve the entire county. And we're just one small component of the county. The other thing that go ahead.
Can you go back to that? Because I think part of it that you showed, it talked about the shifts.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're covering weekday versus weekend,
Yes.
and then town versus village, I think that's an important distinction for people to see, knowing that the coverage that you were looking for is during weekday hours.
Yes. So out of all the calls we missed last year, we missed one on the weekend. The rest of the calls all took place Monday through Friday during the day. So that is, thank you. That's helpful.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Is that a list of that's every call?
But every call we missed in 2024.
Every
So
call.
16,
Every call we missed, yes.
16 total.
16 total calls were missed in 2024 due to the extraordinary efforts of the volunteers.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I mean, good job.
We got some awesome volunteers.
I know one.
You know one? Or two. The other thing that I think is important that maybe people don't realize is that we're not just emergency services. We are a community organization and we do a lot to try and help the community. So this is just a quick run through of some of the things that we do that you won't get if you have centralized EMS. We provide a loan closet that has both adult and pediatric equipment. In fact, we're the only loan closet in Livingston County that is providing pediatric medical equipment. Yes.
We're one of the families that receive equipment for pediatric equipment. It's all equipment that our insurance company would not cover that is extremely necessary for one of our children and has been this whole year. And I personally dropped all of it off at our house. We only had a year of it. We still have some of it rented out. So I just wanted to say that that is something that is just been such a blessing to our family and we definitely use it.
So I'm just going to repeat a touch of that just so the people online can hear that. So we had someone speak up from the back of the room saying that they are utilizing some of the pediatric equipment from our loan closet, and that has been vital to them because their insurance company wasn't going to cover those items. So they were able to utilize things from the loan closet. The other thing that we try to do with the loan closet, and it's not just me, I have lots of awesome people here who come out to the base and grab stuff, but we're available in the off hours. So, a lot of the loan closets are in an office that's only available Monday through Friday during the day. We pop in here on the weekends or the evenings, grab a set of crutches, get a walker out. If you ever pop into the ambulance base, the door that's over here almost always has a variety of medical equipment either going out or coming in because there's a lot of need. And some of the things are such a short-term need. It makes more sense to do that than buy yourself a walker if you only need it for a few weeks. So the other things that we do here that I think are add benefit for the community is we have a list of residents in need. And if anybody wishes to be on that list, in the back, there's my business cards. You guys can email me. I keep a database of people who've let me know that they might have trouble evacuating during an emergency, if they have oxygen in their house, if they have somebody who has communication differences, or a developmental delay that would make it hard for them to interact with emergency services. And so we keep a list of that. And then when providers get a call for an emergency at that residence, it shows up at the top of that screen so that we can be as prepared as possible to take care of whatever situation's there. We offer Stop the Bleed and CPR classes. We're first aid at all the festivals. We're running a Narcan program to make sure that naloxone's available within our community. Parades don't necessarily, and parades just fun. We like to go to the parades. And we do a lot of education. We do programs in the schools and with the scouts. And then put a plug in, this room's available. We make this room accessible to people if they want to come and utilize the space. This is just, and I think there's more things, but that's what I could think of when I put the slide together.
Don't you also have something in your database for when the power goes out, which people are dependent upon power?
We do. Yep, I have. So that's a separate database, but thank you for pointing that out. I do have a database that has a list of the people that I know are on oxygen. So when we get those extended power outages, then we can go and check on those people and make sure that they have enough oxygen. A lot of people who are on chronic oxygen use a concentrator that has to be plugged in. And it can get really scary when you don't know when the power is going to come back on. Thank you. And then just the volunteers here at Lima, we really feel passionately about Lima. We have created a culture here of support for the community, and bringing in staffing and having paid staff here isn't going to change that. I've heard people be concerned about, oh, well, you guys know us so well and you're so passionate about what you do here. If you bring staffing in, that's going to be different. That's not the case. We will still be training and screening everybody who comes on board, and we will continue this mentality of doing what's best for the community and going above and beyond, because that is really what Lima EMS is all about.
So if I could just jump in here, I have a note in my phone from way back when we first met about when I was working with the Lima Library on how we could possibly use the Friends of the Lima Library and Lima EMS to bring the community together, because she sees a different section of Lima and different needs than we do at the library. She sees a lot more vulnerable population. And so she had amazing ideas to bring people together. And we ended up doing 2 books and blood pressure public outreach programs, where we went to the locations and we took people's blood pressure for free, so to try to monitor health. And then we brought them books, especially if they were homebound, and walked them to their door. And they actually just contacted us to do another one. So I just want to say, they practice what they preach. So thanks.
Thank you, Mallory. So that was all the fun stuff, kind of what we do and why we love what we do. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the challenges. So overall, volunteerism in New York State is down, and that's not just talking about EMS volunteerism. It is getting harder and harder to find volunteers to do anything. I'll say Brian has used the quote, the dirty dozen. In Lima, there's like the dirty dozen. That's the 12 people who join every committee and do all the things, and you see them showing up over and over in different volunteer areas, and those are the people who have the time, and then there's a lot of people who don't. So volunteerism is down in general. And unfortunately, EMT numbers are down. It's not a career path that a lot of people choose, and it's a time commitment to becoming an EMT. So we're seeing a shift in a downward trend since 2018. And then on the flip side of that, our call volume is going up. Every year our call volume is going up, ticking upwards. And our costs are increasing. The protocols that the state puts out require different types of equipment. And like everybody here, when you go to the grocery store, the prices of things are going up. The same thing happening here. Band-Aids are more expensive. And so those are the challenges we run into. And the biggest piece is that insurance reimbursement rates aren't keeping up. Yes, John?
You had mentioned in a previous slide that over the entire year of 2024, you only missed 16 calls. How many calls did Lima EMS respond to in 2020? About.
We got a slide coming up.
I think I have a slide coming up for that. I don't know off the top of my head.
It
So
was around 600 if I remember.
yeah, I think we were just shy of 600. We're in the 500 range.
100 times.
Yeah, not quite 600 calls, but it was in the,
We're pushing 6.
yeah, the last couple of years we've been in the upper 500 range. So this is this year. It's a segue right into So far this year, when I talk about this year, just to be clear, we're doing data through the end of September, which puts us about 3/4 of the way through our year. Okay. So at that point, we had been dispatched to 411 calls, and we had ambulance crews responding at 404 of those. And then out of that, 72 of those calls were mutual aid calls. Mutual aid is when we go outside of Lima to help because there aren't people available in the surrounding area. So we fill in when other ambulances don't have a crew, we fill in there. And kudos to my volunteers, everybody who works here as a volunteer, they're covering these. Like, this is amazing. And I know some people will say, oh, well, if you can do this well, why do you need something else? It's a lot of work to be able to do this. And we have people just overextending themselves in ways that is not sustainable. Yes.
Yeah, Meg, you cross county lines like into Monroe or Ontario?
Oh, sorry. I'm just going to repeat that question for everyone online. The question was, do we cross county lines into Monroe or Ontario?
Yeah.
Not as often as we're called into the southern parts of Livingston County, but we are called into, Honeyway Falls will call us on occasion dispatch from Monroe County calls us into Honeyway Falls, I should say, if they are out on a call, and we have been called into Bloomfield. It just doesn't happen nearly as often because we're not in the same system. So it's a little bit disjuncted. But it certainly does happen, multiple times during the year. So anyone who's heard me talk about this, my biggest concern right now is filling the day shift, that Monday through Friday during the day. It's a really hard shift to fill, and it's also where our highest call volume is. So we have most of our volunteers work outside of Lima, and so they can't provide volunteer service during the day. And we scramble using a few people to fill all those shifts. And unfortunately, that's also where people in Lima seem to get sick or get injured the most. So it's an uneven paradigm. So this is a graph. I've done this graph, I think, the last 2 years at the end of the year for the boards to take a look at. But this one's just through the end of September for this year. If you look at this red square here, that's our Monday through Friday day shift. And the darker the green is, the larger number of calls in that hour of the day. So I don't know what's going on Tuesdays at 4. Everybody should stay in their house and don't go outside. Don't do any risky behaviors. So that's a very common time frame for things to be happening. And I'm not to say that we don't have calls other times. Like, if you look over here, oh, there's an 8. We get, 5 o'clock on Saturdays. Also, not the safest time for everybody in Lima. And 11 has a nice trend here, kind of across the board, as being a time to be cautious. But this graph, to me, when we were putting these charts together and looking at these, was really telling, because I'm like, I can feel the pressure of the daytime and I feel the call volume, but this here really shows where the need is. Okay, so now we're going to get into solutions that have been suggested so far and why I don't think they're going to work well for us here in Lima. So the first solution that came up was to take the burden off of Lima EMS, take us out of the picture from Monday through Friday during the day, and only utilize Livingston County ambulance during that time frame. So there's a couple of reasons why this won't work effectively. One of these is that the Department of Health and our certificate of need dictate that Lima Ambulance will provide ambulance coverage to the town and village of Lima. Okay, we signed an agreement with that certificate of need. It says we're going to do this job. When we drop our percentages of call coverage drop down, the Department of Health starts asking questions. They start knocking on your door. And generally, I would say at least for Lima's experience, it seems to be in that 70% range. If you start to cover less than 70% of your calls, then they start to ask, can you really keep your doors open? Is this really a good model? And try and talk about that with you. The other thing that would be really challenging is if we took ourselves off the board, told the county we're not available Monday through Friday during the day. take us off the board, just dispatch Livingston County, we're going to lose a lot of revenue because the operating budget for the ambulance is paid for out of our transports of patients. That's how the ambulance is run. So in order to continue to run the ambulance, we need to have the funds coming in from taking those calls.
I can just tell you too, from my previous experience, I started at Parenton Ambulance in Fairport. When I started with them back in 2004, they were all volunteer, similar type of thing, but all the numbers are just much bigger because obviously it's a bigger community. Their call coverage had started to dip down when it got to be in the 70s or so, was when internally, but also with the Department of Health, they started getting concerned. And that was when they started putting together a staffing plan, and they started to bring in staffing because we just were not in a position to get more volunteers. So that scenario has played out in agencies all over, certainly all over the area, all over the state. And, you know, it's just a matter of, okay, how are you going to approach it? And so that's what these scenarios are.
Oh, sorry.
So where does the money go?
The money
That you get from the insurance or whatever? Does it go back to the ambulance? Does it go to the town? Who gets that money?
Okay, I'm going to recap your question just for the people online. Okay, so the question was, where does the money from insurance go? And that's a great question. So the money from insurance, so if we transport a patient, there is the funds go to the Village of Lima. We are a Village of Lima ambulance, so we fall under the Village's umbrella. The money goes to the Village and it's placed into an account from which the ambulance pays all their bills. It's how we buy apparel for all of our members. It's how we buy medical equipment. We buy the oxygen. It's how we buy the ambulances. Everything that you see that goes into running the ambulance comes from insurance reimbursement. But it goes to the Village and then they put it into a separate account that is earmarked for ambulance expenses. This is a quick chart just showing this is our coverage, our call coverage over the last several years. You can see a trend. This is back here at that 79 that we were talking with the Department of Health and having some concerns there. And we have kind of built that up over the last few years to a higher and higher percentage of calls covered, which keeps us very financially stable from an operating budget as it stands right now. And then this is just a quick, I know it's small and I apologize for everybody, but this is a quick summary. We looked at the average reimbursement on billable claims for the last 2 fiscal years. It runs about $767 per call. And so then you look at that and you extrapolate that out and you look at the number of calls that are happening during that Monday through Friday during the day. And if we didn't cover our calls during that window, we would be losing $95,925 out of our operating funds. And there's not an exact math to the expenses here. You could say, oh, well, if they're not taking calls, they won't have as many expenses. There is reality to that. We will have less, but there's many things that we support. We have to maintain a certain par or a certain amount of equipment on the ambulance, whether we take a call or not, and that expires. That has to be replaced. There's a lot of operating expenses that aren't not directly linked to what gets used on a call. And then this, like I said, I like graphs, so you can keep seeing lots of graphs. This one looks at the call types so far this year, and we have our transports are the green number over here. So when we're getting dispatched out, this is how many times we do transport calls. That's where we're getting in there and someone has a need and we're supporting them and transferring them to the hospital. That's where our billables are coming from. The other number I want to kind of highlight on here is the refusals. So these terminology sound a little funny. They're literally pulled from the EMS chart, which is why it sounds a little strange. Refusal doesn't mean someone's like, I refuse to let you see me. Refusal means the person didn't want to go to the hospital. But that doesn't mean we didn't use equipment. If it's a motor vehicle accident, we probably use some bandages. We probably cleaned them up a little bit and maybe give them ice pack or things like that. So there's an expense there without any reimbursement. Yes.
So if they refuse,
yes,
do you still bill the insurance?
No. So the question was, if they refuse, do we bill insurance? And we can't. I mean, we could bill insurance. Insurance isn't going to cover it.
My understanding is recently New York State passed a CHIP law, the treatment in place that allows for that if there's a specific form filled out. We had a chance to investigate that. And again, there's a lot happening in New York State.
Yes.
Very recently, there's things on the governor's,
Yes.
desk that have not been signed.
Correct.
But this CHIP law, the treatment in place for reimbursement is something that's new. And I guess that form, again, I don't even know if it's completed yet.
I do not, but so the question was, are we aware of the TIP process, the treatment in place? My understanding, and I could be wrong, is that that is not fully rolled out in our region. EMS has a lot of layers. There's what comes out at the state level, and then there's the regional levels, and protocols and things have to trickle down through and get approved through all the levels. And at this stage, my understanding is that's not something we're doing at this regional level.
Well, we're going to look at that.
Yes. I can't make changes to things that aren't approved at the regional level, but absolutely. I think those types of options make a lot of sense. But hands everywhere. Okay.
So if they refuse, but they called for you,
Yes.
do you bill them anything? Because they should have to pay something.
So the question was, if they call us and refuse, do we bill them? At this point, we do not. We follow the same protocols that the agencies around us do. And that has been to not charge in cases where someone refuses. I'll give you an example of why that might not be fair. Okay. I hear your point 100%. Like if you call me and I use all my supplies, why am I not getting some reimbursement on it? But sometimes it's not them that called. Like if you get into a motor vehicle accident and your airbags deploy and law enforcement shows up and they're a little nervous about that because they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't have medical skills. They might call for an ambulance to come and check you out.
Okay.
And then it's a little bit tricky to say, oh, well, now you're responsible for that, even though you didn't want it.
Gotcha.
There's also components of it that we want to do right by the community. And we don't want to discourage people from calling. And if they, if somebody decided, oh, I don't want to take the chance of calling because I don't want to get a bill and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm really not that sick, it might discourage someone from calling, and that's never our goal. But I understand what you're saying. Like looking at all possible revenue sources and reviewing that on a regular basis is something that we're very committed to.
And just to kind of clarify with that, it's not necessarily that we don't bill. It's that the machine of insurance coverage and Medicare and Medicaid or whatever will not cover it. So we could bill for anything that we want to. The person that it's going to affect most is the one that doesn't have any kind of insurance or medical coverage or anything whatsoever, because they would get a bill and not have anybody to send it to. We could send it to Medicare all day long and they're going to say, well, this is something that we cover. And
Thank you, Dave. Yes, Steve.
Could you explain to everybody how your rates are determined? I mean, it's like a grocery type list of what was used on that call, or what the intents was of the transport and everything. And then kind of secondhand, it feeds into that. You and I have talked before. You are kind of in the high 95% rate, where is it somewhere in there that you recoup your money? You just brought that up. You don't always get your money.
Okay. So just to rephrase Steve's question, he's asking about how we bill. And then the other piece was, do we always get our money? So how we bill is a little bit tricky. Every year I reach out to our billing company and they give me a list of the rates that other agencies around us are billing. I don't get to see who's billing it, but they give me like a summary, like here's the rates from around you. And we make sure that we stay with what's competitive. There are different types of rates. There's rates for, lower level of need and care. And there's higher level rates based on a higher acuity of the patient. The sicker the person, the more injured the person. And we bill on those lines. And the tricky part, Dave kind of alluded to it too. I mean, in theory, if I really wanted to, I could make our billing rates $2 million per call. I could just do that. And I could say, okay, that's what we're going to bill. But insurance isn't going to cover it. Insurance has a preset amount. If you think about that, if you've ever looked at your bill coming home out of a hospital or a doctor, you can kind of see the adjustment. Here is what the hospital billed. Here's what the insurance was willing to pay. Here's the adjustment, and here's how much you owe. It's kind of like you can see that across your medical bill. It's the same basic thing for EMS. We put a rate in that is competitive, and it is similar to what our agencies around us are doing, but the insurance company still chooses what they pay. And some insurances pay more than others. And sometimes we have something called bundled billing. So with those patients, we partner with ALS and ensure that patients are only getting one bill. But in those cases, we pay the ALS company for putting a paramedic on our ambulance. And then your question about the amount of return and reimbursement, that's gotten better through the years. Our medics, the medics is the billing company that does it for us. They follow up on claims and are diligent. I'm very grateful for them. The money we pay them is well worth it, that we don't have as individuals have to track down people who aren't paying their bills, but they do a good job of tracking that. There was a thing a while back where the insurance companies were sending checks to people's houses, and then some people didn't realize what that was for, and so they held on to those and thought, oh, this is great. I got money for going to the hospital, like bonus. That doesn't happen anymore, but it actually was a very small percentage of the calls we take anyway. But Medics does a great job of making sure that we're getting our money's worth. Okay, so another solution that has been proposed is just to continue to rely on our volunteers to cover all the shifts here in Lima. So last year, volunteers covered 17,520 hours. That's a lot of hours. So you can go to the next one. Basically, I'm just going to say that. Yeah. So basically, I'm saying that it's just we don't have enough active volunteers to make this sustainable. It's a lot of hours. We need 2 people to crew up an ambulance, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If we can really do this well and make sure that people have an ambulance when they need it. So here's just a little bit of a snapshot on why our current volunteer situation is not sustainable. Only 12 of our 53 members run consistently, and 12 of those run between 8 and 283 hours a month. There's 5 members here who are running 47% of the shifts. So we're setting ourselves up for a failure. If one of those 5 members isn't able to continue any longer, if there's a situation where one of us has a life change or something like that, where are we going to fill in the rest of those hours? And then this is just talking about being on call. I'm not talking about all the other things that we do around here, the admin work, the inventory, QA, base maintenance, all the regulations that the state puts on us that we have to hold up to. Those things that's extra time on top of what we're doing on call. Yes.
Sorry, can you go back? You need an EMT on every call, right? So
Correct.
How many of those people are EMTs versus drivers?
4.
4 EMTs out of the 12?
Oh, repeat the question. Okay, so the question was that clarifying that we need an EMT on every call. Yes, every call requires an EMT and a driver. And she was asking how, of those 5 people who are covering the majority of those calls, how many of them are EMTs? And I'm 90% sure that I'm saying that accurately, that there's 4 of those people are EMTs. Yes.
There are individuals that can fill in the role of EMT or the driver.
Correct.
So those hours put into person serving as the EMT and as a driver on separate.
Yeah. So the question or statement from the back was that some of our members function in 2 roles. They are both an EMT and can drive the ambulance. So yeah, sometimes the numbers get a little bit hazy when you look at that. It's hard to divide out like, oh, these people are just doing EMT or they're just doing driver. So of those 4 EMTs that are running on a regular basis, sometimes they might be driving for another EMT. There was a situation the other day that Dave and I ended up on a call together. We try not to do that. I'd rather kind of space out our EMTs and not use up that resource. But when you got to pull a crew, you got to pull a crew. So you pull in 2 EMTs if that's all that's available at that time. And then this is just a chart that looks at our numbers again. It's kind of a recap of what was on the last one. Looking at, these are our top 12 volunteers and how, on average, what their monthly hourly commitment is. And then I think sometimes there's the idea that volunteers are free and there's no cost associated with adding volunteers. Each time we get a new member, it costs us approximately $300 with the equipment we have to outfit them with, the clothing, things along those lines. Each new EMT going through EMT class, we're very lucky that New York State will cover the cost of class as long as they are an active member of the organization and they finish the class. But there's still costs associated with putting someone through class, making sure they have the textbooks and all the pieces of that, so that they can be successful and they can take that class. And then the last one, we do training throughout the year. Part of that is for regulation. All of our EMTs need continuing ed, and we try and make sure that everybody has access to that. And that costs approximately $5,000 a year.
Is that per person?
The 5,000? No, that's our overall. We're very fortunate. We've established relationships with a lot of great teachers, and throughout the region. And we've been very lucky that there are many of them who come here free of charge to provide continuing ed for us because of the relationships we built. I'm just going to go off script just for a second. Joyce brought some information. If people are interested in becoming an EMT, there's some information on the side over there about what an EMT class in New York State looks like, how many hours of time it is, and what kind of is taught during that. So if you're curious what becoming an EMT looks like, it's over there on the side. Yes.
Meg, do we also have the textbook that we put out there so they can see the textbook? We have an older edition textbook.
You want to look and find one? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I just want to remind everyone that my goal is not to get rid of volunteers. That's not this model. That's not the plan. We're just looking for a way to create some reprieve from volunteers who are overextending themselves. There are many of us that volunteer and want to keep going with volunteering. We're not looking to be that paid person. So it's not that we're trying to get rid of our volunteers. Our volunteers are the backbone of this institution. Several times this question has come up, and I'm not sure exactly where it's coming from, but I want to make sure I addressed it. Will paid staff cause volunteers to quit? And I don't think that's going to happen. We've had conversation with volunteers here at the agency who people are ready to have somebody else take on some of the responsibility. It's not a matter of, oh, they're getting paid now, so, well, why would I volunteer if I can't get paid? That's not the mentality of people that I've spoken to. There are also many agencies throughout New York State that do a hybrid model that have paid staff and volunteers. It's not unheard of. It's very successful. And in fact, there are several agencies I've spoken to that said that this model is what's kept them running and sustainable over the last several years. It's the reason that I've leaned into this solution when the other solutions I had tried for getting more volunteers didn't work.
So just for me personally, not, on behalf of anybody else or anything. But like I said, I started with Parenton. Parenton started transitioning from an all volunteer to bringing in part-time staff. They would fill in the schedule with volunteers and then bring in the staff in the slots that didn't get covered. And they did that for a number of years, basically until they got so much call volume that they had to start bringing in full-time people even. I'm also a volunteer with Huntington Falls Mendon Ambulance, and they work the same way. So the volunteers sign up on the schedule for their slots. Whatever doesn't get filled in by them gets slotted in by the part-time staff that take the rest of those positions. Whether people are getting paid or not, whether they're part-time or volunteer or whatever, in my experience, doesn't come up. It's not a conversation around the table. It doesn't affect training. It doesn't affect, any operations or anything like that. We're all there doing whatever job we're there to do. We're there working together to cover calls and do whatever we have to do. And, it's not like I would be saying, oh, well, now, there's paid positions here. I'm only going to do that. The nights that I'm on call, I work during the day. So when I'm here doing hours, I'm generally at home. I take the fly car. It sits in my driveway. And if a call comes in, then, I go out and take it. And that's what works for me because I want to be able to help my community. And that's why I do it.
Dave. Yes.
Nick, are you aware of the Governor Hochul signed in July 1st, the higher education Service Corporation form. That's for in New York State, for in-need job categories, including EMS. If you're between the ages of 25 and 55, you can get free tuition books at community college. So anyone who's interested in this as a career field, really, other than having to pay for their own food and board somewhere, can have a free education. And places like GCC and MCC will be able to help them guide through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Brian brought up that there is now opportunities for people to get free education in certain fields, including EMS. We're already very fortunate that New York State covers the tuition for EMTs. So that it's been a great selling point for me to be able to go out to the community and say, hey, would you like to try? Do you want to be an EMT? Like, you ever thought about it? You can do this and it's not going to cost you anything. And it's been a great way for us to bring in some volunteers, into the agency. So we already have the tuition piece covered. We'd have to look into the piece of how the books and the supplies are covered, but I think it only applies to people who are intending to be in career. And so it may be a little tricky from a volunteer agency, but it's certainly worth looking into. Okay, so another solution that we looked at earlier this year was to ask Livingston County to fund Lima EMS or provide staffing to Lima EMS. So we had a meeting involved representatives from the village and the town, myself and Livingston County EMS. We sat down in June and really went through and looked at whether this was a potential. It's not, unfortunately. Livingston County Ambulance is responsible for the entire county. They're a great agency. We work side by side with them. They're our partners a lot of times on calls. But their responsibility is to the entire county. Like, we're Lima. Like, look at that map over there. We're in a tiny little corner of a giant county. So they can't dedicate staff to tiny little Lima up in the northeast corner. And they can't give us funds because they have an agency to run. It wouldn't be irresponsible to the entire county for them to fund one agency. So they just said that's not something that's feasible, not something that they can do, at least at this stage.
Is that a fully paid staff agency, Max?
It is, correct. So the question was if that is a fully paid staffed agency, and Livingston County EMS is all paid. They have a combination of paramedics or ALS level providers and EMTs or basic level providers. They do not have drivers that are not filling one of those two roles. So they pair up, and typically it's a ALS tech and a EMT that are providing the service. Something else that kind of falls under the same umbrella that we talked about at that meeting is that there are several bills that are right out there right now on the governor's desk that we're waiting to see what's going to happen with it. One of them is making EMS essential. I'm sure if you've, been on watching the news and things, this has been discussed quite a bit. Definitely recommend everyone, if you're interested in this, go down the rabbit trail and read all the stuff about this, because some of the essential stuff is kind of interesting to read. It really is much more applicable in New York City than it is out here in upstate. But it hasn't even been put through. So we don't know if that's happening or when that's happening. There's also a Senate bill that went through that was requiring a plan for EMS coverage. So if you really read it and you read it carefully, all it's asking is that every county have a plan for how to ensure that residents get EMS coverage. Nowhere in there does it dictate that the state or the county will fund coverage for the entire county or that they will provide service for the entire county. It really just asks them it gives them 6 months to come up with a plan to make sure the services are available and have backup plans if something were to happen. And it asks them to work carefully with the already existing agencies. It also hasn't been approved yet, but.
And both of those have been approved by the Senate and they're on Governor Hochul's desk.
My understanding is yes. So Brian was pointing out where it is in legislation, and my understanding is you are correct. They have been approved and they are waiting for the governor to finalize her approval on them. So. Okay, and so the last solution is probably the one that's gotten the most attention, and that is the solution of phasing out Lima Ambulance and utilizing exclusively Livingston County Ambulance. So again, we work very closely with Livingston County Ambulance. I have nothing negative to say about them. I consider them partners and teammates in this. However, in the last few years, we're seeing an increase in the amount of mutual aid that we're being asked to do. Mutual aid is when Lima Ambulance is asked to go and cover a call in a town that is not Lima. And that occurs when the ambulances for Livingston County are tied up doing all the other emergencies. It fits with the same understanding that we have. Our call volume is going up. If our call volume is going up, everyone's call volume is going up. If you have a scanner in your house, you'll hear it. If the calls come in, like there's like lull zones where you're like, is this thing on? But in general, you get a lot of, like, it's a lot. You hear them going out. They're on their way back from the hospital, another call is coming in and they got to get, how far out are they to be able to take that next one? So it doesn't seem at this stage that we are set up for that to be a successful model where they can be here in effectively covering for the District of Lima. Yeah. So this here talks about for this year, the bottom row, I think is the one you're going to want to focus on. This is mutual aid. So again, when we're getting asked to go somewhere other than Lima, and you can see even just during the course of this year, we've got some highlight months. February was really busy. July got busy. August was incredibly busy. And then in September was busy again.
Were they all billable?
No.
So, okay.
Yeah,
So the strategy with that, so they're not billable, right? So now you Lima are out, but you went somewhere else.
Correct.
Is there any way are you trying to capture that cost from Livingston County back and let Livingston County take the hit?
So just recapping the question, it's asking whether all those calls are billable, and then do we recoup anything there? So they're not all billable, and sometimes we get like halfway there and then they cancel us because they figure something else out, and sometimes we get there and we provide care and ultimately the patient doesn't want to go to the hospital. We can't kidnap people. They have the right to not go to the hospital.
How does it balance out? You get called 12 times in February to go someplace else. How many times did somebody get called to come in?
So far this year, we've missed 7. There's 7 times we have not had an ambulance and we had to utilize mutual aid into Lima. But to be fair, when we have a very serious call in Lima, if it's somebody who has a high priority call, those 1s and 2s that we saw earlier, we do utilize Livingston County as a paramedic to partner with us to provide the total care for that patient. So they're coming into Lima more often than 7 times, but we're only using like half their crew in those situations. And then back to your question about the reimbursement placement. It's a tricky question. I don't have a solid answer for you. I'll tell you that we don't have a plan, and I'll tell you that it's hard. Mutual aid is a core component of EMS, and we all do it for each other. And so it's a kind of a slippery slope if we start telling them like, hey, you got to pay us because we came in and covered for you, because if we need them, and if like I said, there's 5 of us running an awful lot. If one of us stops running and we need a lot more mutual aid, that's going to cost Lima a ton more. It's also, so there's a little bit of a gray zone there, but I hear you. It drives me absolutely batty when we drive out to something and then drive back and I think of all the fuel and the mileage on the ambulance, because maybe we didn't use any supplies, but we drove all the way there. We drove all the way back. It was somebody's time. If they transport a patient, 100%, to me, I will take a patient from anywhere. It's really about patient care and what's best for people. I don't care where they live. But it is a little bit tricky in that scenario.
But the numbers are right. It's out of kilter. If you're saying, right, look
Yes.
at the volume we have there.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I agree. The numbers are out of kilter. I don't have a solution for that necessarily. There's no model that I'm aware of in which places pay for mutual aid. I could be wrong, but I don't know of that model being established.
Mutual aid that they pay for.
There we go. Yeah.
Mutual aid, they come and help us, we help them, and
Yeah.
nobody's gonna pay anybody.
Yeah. And it's just one of the pillars of EMS, the way that we've always done it. And just because we say we've always done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. But I don't know that there's a model elsewhere to fulfill that. But I hear what you're saying. Yes, John. I think that's up next.
That's coming up.
It was, but I got more information in the next one. But thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Steve, you might be able to help us out with this. Just looking at interagency cooperation, I know there's guys that drive like you did for many years. The fire department would it be possible for some of those people to qualify on your rates and provide at least transportation during the day?
We
Would
have.
that help out?
Do you want Steve to answer it or me?
Either.
Well, I can tell you right now, of the 37 years I've been in the Lima Fire Department, we are at the highest acceptability between both agencies right now. We have one of the best chiefs and one of the best chiefs in the ambulance. I'm not just here, this is your program today, but those of you that were not there at our town board meeting the other night, Dickie Gary was very eloquent of also letting you people know this isn't just about the ambulance, it's both agencies. And what's going to happen if the Lima ambulance, look, that's fine, we're going to get rid of it. Yeah, we're going to be obstinate and get rid of our damn ambulance. Now the problem is what she's talking about and presenting you here today, it's about employee burnout. Let's get right to the bottom of it. It's employee burnout. And by trying to get some more people in here, it takes the pressure and the burden off of her staff. Yeah, do we all want to pay more things in life? No, let's be honest at time. We don't want to pay more. But what is the higher important factor here? Is it the care of the people in the town of Lima? Or is it a few dollars per year that maybe we're going to have to ante up, or whatever solution it's going to be? I'm not saying more money is the solution, but unfortunately it looks like it might have to be. But to take that even further, if the ambulance goes away and we start having to go on EMS calls with Livingston County ambulance, you just didn't lose your ambulance, folks. You're going to, over time, in a short time, lose your fire department, because all of us that have volunteered over the years, too, yeah, there's a lot of calls. We've had sometimes 2-3 calls on a weekend, and the amount of time that's involved, our average call is probably maybe about a half of what their call time is, because they have to not only go to the scene, they have to transport, they have to go to the hospital. And if we start going on EMS calls with Livingston County or some other ambulance agency, you're going to burn out the fire department, and now put that into a town or village budget. And I'm going to tell you, you are not going to be happy.
I want to come back and just touch to answer your question. In addition, you touched on it, but I find we do, like what Steve said, we have a really good working relationship with the fire department, and we actually do have multiple members who are members of both, and we do have cross training in that sense. We have several drivers for the fire department who also drive for the ambulance, and that's been a great working relationship that we've built up over the last several years. So, but keep coming up with creative ideas like that, because this solution is the idea that I have for things. It doesn't mean it's the only solution for things. I'm open to creativity. I'm open to suggestions of other ways to find a way to staff this that just doesn't keep burning out the few volunteers we have.
Hey, May.
Yes.
I know Gary, I don't think we will need, those are the calls that Lima is covering from mutual aid.
Correct.
But it doesn't include Avon, Tennessee'o. I mean, I think you said like Avon covered like 80 calls in a month that the county is not picking up. So that's only Lima, not including all the other ambulances that are also, mutual aid calls.
So just to recap that, it was a question about the mutual aid and highlighting the fact that, yes, we are leaving Lima to cover calls, but we're not the only agency that's doing that. So we're just when you look at our number of mutual aid, it's a component. The other volunteer agencies in Livingston County are also covering mutual aid there as well. So the data isn't only us. We're not the only ones being called. Livonia gets called, Dansville gets called, Mount Morris gets called. They're all getting called in to cover that mutual aid and to fill that deficit. And then what John mentioned earlier is one of the things that came up during that meeting in June was and kind of that feeds into what Steve was saying as well, that if we are only using Livingston County ambulance, the recommendation that from Livingston County is that we establish a first responder squad here in Lima. So it would essentially be their way of helping to shorten the response time. So an emergency provider is on scene providing medical care in those first few minutes. The challenges of that is it's not reimbursable. That is not, there's going to be no insurance reimbursement on that, which means that burden of that falls back to the taxpayer. And I did some asking around, and it sounds like if you wanted to do that for the call volume that we have, it would run about $20,000. So, and then just, this is kind of a bit of a recap, but centralized EMS using a county-based system is not community EMS. So they're not going to run the programs that we run. They're not going to do the education. They're not going to be coming in and sitting at the festivals and handing out ice packs and Band-Aids at the first aid station. That's just not something that centralized EMS is going to do because they're not committed to Lima. They're committed to the bigger picture. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what people want, but it's not what Lima's used to. Lima's used to a very community-centered ambulance. Okay, so this is what I think is the solution. Like I said, I'm open to more creative options, but this is through the years that I've been doing this and the different strategies that I've tried, I feel like I've kind of gotten to the point where this seems to be the solution that works best. And from talking to other EMS agencies, it's worked well for other places. And that is to work with a staffing agency to provide part-time paid staff to help offset and give our volunteers a little bit more reprieve on the schedule. And then still continue to look at grants and alternative funding because it doesn't need to be the only thing that helps with this. So this is the proposal I put through last year. I provided this to the boards last year. We've got, and this is with a staffing company. The benefit of a staffing company is we've got part-time staff working there and their contract, which is going to be less costly than if we were hiring someone on and had to manage all the benefits and things that go along with full-time staffing. So we're looking at this, we're looking at an EMT and a driver, and we kind of break it down by how much it would cost per day and then how much it would cost for the week and then what it would cost for the year. And additionally, there's the annual admin fees that the staffing agency charges. So I know everyone's question. That 141,000 is way more than the 25 that everyone's talking about, right? We're talking about 25,000. Where did this 141 come from? The 25,000, it was a proposal that the village came up with. We talked about how can we get started? You know, we have a 141 is not reasonable right now. We can't go from 0 to 100 or 141,000 in overnight. We need to have a plan. We need to have a bridge along the way. And so this was the plan we came up with. The village came up and said, okay, we can give 25,000. They found room in their budget. They made room in their budget to make that happen and help that happen. And then they reached out to us and said, can you match that? And I said, okay, I think I can. I looked at our finances over the last couple of years. I looked at what we have in savings, and I said, I think we can pull off matching that. If we can get the town to come in and give 25,000 too, now we're about halfway to our goal. So that gets me a couple of days a week of staffing, and it gives us the opportunity to get started with this pilot program of looking at, okay, we put staffing in a couple of days a week. What does it look like when we work with a staffing company? What are the challenges? Like I said, I've talked to multiple agencies who do this, but when you put something into place the first time, there's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be some challenges. But this gives us an opportunity to get started and see how it plays out so that we can make decisions and keep moving forward in creating a sustainable model. Yes.
The 25,000, I think it's important to, and I believe I'm right. It's 25,000 from the town, 25,000 from the village, 25,000 from the.
Correct. So 25,000 comes out of the ambulance's operating funds from the insurance reimbursement, 25,000 from taxpayers for the village, and 25,000 from taxpayers for the town.
Will that be put in a separate account? How will that be managed?
The question is, will that be put into a separate account? And how will that be managed? That's a great question. As of right now, I don't think we have a perfectly clear answer on that. There's a contract between the town and the village, and John, correct me if I misspeak here, that goes to paying the mortgage on the building, the debt service on the building. And that money is never seen in the ambulance's operating funds. That's a totally separate line. I envision it being something similar to that, because so that money is dedicated, and we've got we'd have to pull it out of the ambulances fund and out of the general fund for the village, and then put the town all together. But it would make the most sense.
Well, yeah, with today's proposal, right? That's
Yeah.
what we're talking. We're talking
Correct.
labor. We're talking peak
Bodies.
right?
Yep.
I think for to see if it's been being successful, because there might be a reserve left over, right?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And that could get you farther. So
100%. I really do think it needs to be a separate line in however that Alyssa, the clerk, she manages the budget. She figures out how all things look on paper. I'm not as good at that piece of it. I know how to look. I balance our budget and break it down into where our expenses are, but I don't understand all the logistics of how it happens at the municipal level. But I do believe that isolating those funds completely separate so that we know what we're using and how we're using them, especially during this pilot program, is going to be very important.
Scott, I just tell you from a village resident, well, you're a village, you have village property. You see on the village tax bill, it's an itemized ambulance tax that we have. So that's already been parsed out on the village side. So not on the
not
town.
on the town side. So when we go to the town side,
Town just has, I think, fire.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at the budgets, right, it'd be great to see underneath the ambulance side a separate scenario.
Yeah.
And we talked about the relationship with the village, town and the village. That ends next year, right? 2026, that contract ends.
Correct.
So now a new contract has to be negotiated. But overall, if it's for the building, that building mortgage is paid in 30. When does that end?
3 years.
3 years from now.
Just under 4.
Just 4. I think it's
So
yeah,
30.
4
So
years.
it's
2030.
So that's another 20 some odd thousand.
Correct.
Which could be allocated.
I mean,
Yeah.
if that's because right now, the town to the village, that's a village asset. This is a village asset, not an ambulance asset, right? So, I mean, that's in 3 years, 3 or 4 years, there's another $20,000 that the village or that the town has been setting aside that could and should, in my mind, right? We've been
Yeah.
right.
It's been proposed.
That could go into that fund if we're talking labor, since the building, the assets paid, the town doesn't own this. So if the village said this place goes away, the village, it goes back into the village.
Correct.
So I would say if I were you, I would negotiate to get that extra.
I think Supervisor Thompson was very clear that $20,000 will not go to the ambulance. He's been very clear about this.
In 3 years, 4 years from now?
Correct.
Well, I think
He absolutely is dead set against that.
well, I think that's where us as townspeople and dedicated people will have a voice. So,
I certainly hope.
Brian, you have a question?
So I just wanted to add some clarity. We, the village board, and you have worked for 4 years to get to this point. Things. The question is that.
He wants you to be heard.
So, and again, Mayor John can confirm with and add to this too. The village and the ambulance have worked for 4 years to get to this point. 4 years ago, we talked about a successful business model, because I've come from a town where the business model stayed traditional and they just stopped having an ambulance, and it was overnight. It's happened in Caledonia. It's happened in York. It's happened in multiple places in the county. That's why the county has to cover these places. We started 4 years ago. Big part of that was the 501c3, the foundation that has been created for the ambulance. That allows for grants funding that the village and government cannot get. It also allows for private citizens to donate. I know that they're working on things like United Way, getting it established with them. Those are things that you as an individual can do, but it also allows for the hiring of the part-time staff, not making them a government employee of the village, saves a considerable amount of money. The truth is that EMTs get paid nothing. They're a minimum wage. Every EMT I've ever known lives on overtime and works 70 hours a week sometimes. So,
yeah,
fair enough. I just wanted to add that that's something that we've been working on for 4 years now. to get to this point.
Yeah.
Nothing will happen overnight. The idea of getting to this point of a partial paid staff is just part of that long-term commitment. So.
Agreed.
And
Yeah. I mean,
the mayor.
yeah. Yeah, it has, we really have, it's been 4 years of discussions, and trying to come up with any solution that didn't involve raising taxes. This was not the first solution that we came up with. We tried strategies. I wrote letters to every business in town and said, hey, can you give me a driver for a few hours during the week? You know, I've been out canvassing. I've done lots of volunteer campaigns. We've looked into multiple funding. Melinda really helped push through the nonprofit and making sure that we could get that done this past year. So yes, I think that's a good point. This didn't just happen overnight. This hasn't been like we just woke up one day and said, let's raise everyone's taxes. It's really been a process. Yes.
I have a question about the staffing arrangement. It sounds like an employee leasing plan.
That's a good way to describe it, correct?
Right? Is fractional employee leasing one of the options you have available? In other words, if you took the 75,000 that you get, can you buy half a week of staffing from the leasing agency, give your staff, give your volunteers more days off, better rest and recovery time, to make it more sustainable for a longer period of time until 2030, when additional funds might become available or other funding options through the 501c3.
Yeah, I'm just going to recap what you said because it's a really great question. It was a question about whether this is like a staff leasing model, and I think that's a great way to describe it. And there absolutely is a solution for doing it at only a couple days a week. It would be, when you use the staffing company, they look to staff a full shift, so a 12-hour shift. They're not going to send somebody out here for 4 hours. Our volunteers do all sorts of funny little 4 hours here and 6 hours there, and it pieces all together to make sure we can keep coverage. The staffing companies can't do that. You can't just send somebody out here for 4 hours, but we do have the opportunity to do something at a smaller level where it is, 2 days a week, and then kind of work through that, take the reprieve, take the balance, and then look at how that's working. And that's what I anticipate would happen. You had a question?
There's lots of questions, and I know you had some people who are going to speak here.
Yes.
Testimonials. My daughter has a 2 and a 4-year-old at home and has to leave at 4. So I just want to let you know.
Okay. I know. We're running out of time. Okay. Let's see it. What's left? Okay. Go ahead and ask your question while I.
So just looking at the 25,000 that's coming from the village.
Go ahead. Go there.
That's coming from the town. Those numbers can seem intimidating. What's the breakdown per taxpayer? What's that increase per taxpayer?
I wish I had a solid answer for you. So the question is, what is the breakdown per taxpayer? I know that there's been a lot of people who are way better with the math on that than I am, that have been looking into it. And so I wish I had a clear answer for you on that, but it was been very hard to tease it out at both the town and the village level, to really know how much it, when we split this all out, what it ends up being. I'm hopeful that I'd really hope to have that information today. I don't have all of it confirmed, and I don't want to give a number that isn't accurate. We have a couple of guesses, but I don't want to be misquoted.
The issue is that it'd be nice to say it's per adult in the village or per adult in the town, but it's by your taxable housing tax. It's a percentage of that. So it's people who own property in the village, not people who, not every person. We'll really break it down. If you have a $100,000 home, you pay less. If you have a $400,000 home, you pay more. That's the way it works out.
There's an average assessment, right?
There is an average, but I think the honest way to say it is just like your school taxes, it's going to be by your taxable property tax.
I do hope to have that information for everyone, and I will make that available. I couldn't get confirmation on those numbers, and I didn't want to provide inaccurate information here today. But thank you for the question. So I'll wrap up, try as quickly as I can, and we can get to questions again after we have a few people speak. But just so that everyone, I talked about it before, but just wanted to kind of lay it out there again. The ambulance, the operating funds, everything that we do to make this ambulance run all the time is just coming from our reimbursement. There's no taxpayer funds that are going into any part of running the ambulance right now. That 25,000 that the village dedicated is kind of still on its separate little line. It hasn't hit my operating budget, and I don't intend it to, because that's not what its goal is. It's not intended to help buy oxygen or medical supplies. It's intended to work on a staffing model. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Like, I've had people say, like, my taxpayer dollars pay your salary. Well, I don't get paid, so you know. Or they'll say, you know, my taxpayer dollars bought that ambulance. And just so people are aware, like, we're not using taxpayer funds. We're volunteers making this work, and just everything that it takes to make the ambulance run comes from reimbursement. But there are taxpayer dollars that are dedicated to the ambulance. It's easier to see on the village, and the way that tax is broken down. It's a little bit trickier to see on the town side, because it falls under the fire department's line. And so those taxpayer funds, it goes to the debt on the building, or they call it the debt service. It's the mortgage, basically. It's what we're paying off here. And that cost is split out between the town, the village, and the ambulance's operating budget also puts money into that every year. The ambulance operating budget also takes care of all the maintenance on the building and puts money into savings for when inevitably we need a new roof. So the building belongs to the village, but the ambulance is maintaining it, except for the grounds, because the DPW guys do a great job on taking care of our grounds. And then we are always looking at fundraisers and donations. And now that we have the nonprofit mostly solidified, we can do a little bit more with that. Okay, so this is pretty much the last one, and then I will let everyone help us out talking today. So there's a couple different ideas of how this could be lined up, and I think that's what we were talking about earlier. The first one is a line item in the budget that is specifically saying this is for staffing and staffing alone. And that would be broken down into the two, both at the town and the village level. I've never been opposed to breaking the ambulance out from the fire department at the town level. The only time I said anything about it is when I was told it was going to cost $10,000, and I didn't think it was a good use of funds just to separate us when the fire department and the ambulance both know where the money goes. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to it. I'm all about transparency. I will sit down and meet with anybody and show you the books and show you all my numbers and things. That's not what it ever was. I was like, if you're not going to give the ambulance money, why would we spend that much money just to make another line? The other idea would be to do like a referendum and actually make ambulance its own overarching, funding in there. We would still always use funds from the transports, but if maybe that's another way, then it's something that's sustainable, and it's something that's not subject to who the budget is set by each year. It just stays there. And we would have a board of supervisors, our own internal board that's managed that money and determined how it was used. And then there's fundraising. And then I would love to just say I could do this all with volunteers. I would love that if there's, 12 more people who want to drive every week and 10 more people who want to be EMTs and run on a consistent basis. And you can do that and commit to doing that for a while. We could probably make this happen. We just haven't been able to find people who can do that and stick with it. So, not to discredit the people who are doing this work, but I can't find enough people to fill all those slots in a way that doesn't exhaust everybody else. So I'm going to skip on questions right now, and I am going to call on a couple people who want to tell their stories today. So I'll start with Rachel so that she can get home to her littles. No, don't apologize.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Rachel. And a year ago in May, I had brain surgery to remove a tumor. And during that surgery, I had to be awake for 2 hours so that they could map out my brain and take as much of the tumor out as possible without impacting any of my functioning. But what was actually more traumatic than that was 6 weeks after surgery, I had a seizure. And I had never had one before, so it was extremely terrifying. And before I went unconscious, I told my husband, call 911. EMS was there before I even woke up. And the first thing I remember is them saying, like, you just had a seizure, you'll be okay. And just the fact that they made it within, 3 to 5 minutes to be there, that was huge. And then, they held my hand the entire way in the ambulance. Amanda, that was you. And then stayed with me at the hospital until my husband could make it. And the whole time just like extremely comforting and just made me feel safe. And like, I mean, you think like I had brain surgery. I was awake during brain surgery, but then you had a seizure and that's what like knocked you out. But like it did. So having someone be there for me during that time was just like, I'm forever grateful for that. Like prior to that, I would have never thought of much about the ambulance. You know, I'm young. Like, you know, I thought, okay, maybe someday for my parents, but you know, not me. Sorry. But now my philosophy is 100%. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So thank you so much. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Stevens. I've been a part of this Lima community for over 30 years now. I'm gonna hopefully recount to you guys 2 experiences that helped shape and save my life. That directly, this happens. Yes. When I was younger, I was the only one home, and my grandma and grandfather, we built an addition on the house, and they were with us at that point. I was too young to drive. My grandma's license was gone. My grandfather's license was gone after his second stroke. When grandma came down and said, "Hey, grandpa had fallen," I didn't know what to expect, but what did I do? I grabbed the Boy Scout handbook and I went upstairs. And flipping through it, I realized right away to call 911, and started stroke procedure on him. Got him raising the legs, got him comfortable and situated. This wasn't our first time with the strokes, but it was the 3rd time. And the impact that had on me was I thought I was going to be a physical therapist. And he came home from the hospital. I began working with him. Because Lima Ambulance was able to get there so quickly, I had that time with him. Gave me a career path, gave me an idea of what I wanted. Having went through physical therapy after my own incident and Lima bringing me back from the ambulance when Lima Ambulance was able to pick me up from the air ambulance up in Rochester and bring me back and put me into bed after my accident, I realized that this was something that we couldn't live without. The timing of it all is shocking because 2 years ago, I had another incident where I wouldn't be here today. The difference between the Livingston County ambulance showing up to the house and the Lima ambulance showing up to the house was me being able to talk today. I was laying unconscious in my fairway of my field. My wife had called 911. I can't recount that experience. At that point, I was already gone. She was able to do it. I had gotten stung over 100 times. I was out on the 4-wheeler. No idea that this could happen. It did. I had gotten to a point where I was able to make a call. I called the wife. Okay, this is where I'm at. She was able to see out to where I was at. And she made the call to Lima EMS and was able to get them out there. I was able to recount this incident this past week with Meg, when she came over and I drove her around on the golf cart and showed her and this is where I was. And she let me know we would have never gotten to you. If I had not gotten to the point where I was able to be with my daughter in the golf cart, driving out with Meg in the passenger seat, and she jumping out and putting the EpiPen in my leg, and me waking up at that point, I was gone. It was black. The world around me wasn't there. I instantly came back to. She put me in the back of the ambulance, and we were on our way to Tompkins Hospital, and I see Livingston County ambulance there. By that point, she'd already put another EpiPen in my leg. There wasn't the time. That 7.5 minutes is a difference that we need to make sure that those young people don't have to go through a detrimental experience when it can be very much alleviated by a little budget item, line item, whatever it may be. The volunteers that need to be brought out by everybody that's out there to the people to be paid. It's just such a valuable, you can't even put a number on it. I'm so happy to be here, so happy to share one of my stories. I went through and talked with the wife so much about this. I had pages written down, but I realized that it's not about me and my story. It's about the drive for these people that need our help because they're the ones that are helping us. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Melinda Fleming. I've been an educator for 23 years. I'm on the Lima Rotary, and I was also a village board trustee for a year. I have lived in this district for 44 years with my family. One afternoon, I was packing up my classroom, and I got a call from my sister's aide. My sister is disabled. She has cerebral palsy, and my mom was her caretaker. And my sister's aide said, something's not right with mom. So I fly from the Manor School and I get over there. And when I look at her, my entire world had just changed in an instant. My mom was losing all of her bodily functions. She was turning gray and blue colors I had never seen before. She was moaning. And at that point, by the time I had gotten there, the aide had already called 911. And I was able to also talk to the dispatcher, and we were able to get her on the floor and start some procedures ourselves. So we dispatched 911 at 3:39 p.m. and they arrived 9 minutes later. That's with the call, the dispatch, and getting to my mom's house. And if you're familiar with the area, my mom lives on the corner of Idison and Martin. It's one of the farthest points in the district that Lima has to go. But because she has a Livingston County mailing address, Lima gets dispatched, even though Highland Falls is right there at the other end. But that's how it goes. So 9 minutes they were there, and I can tell you I was so happy to see them. Like Meg had said before, it seems like forever when you are literally watching somebody die right in front of you. So if Livingston County had to come, and they were in Mount Morris at the time, can you imagine how long it would have taken them to get there? They got to work right away. They did all kinds of life-saving things on my mother. They did CPR. She had to be shocked 2 times. She was literally clinically dead for 10 minutes, and her heart was restarted. So without Lima EMS, my mom wouldn't be here today. She just wouldn't. She would have never made it. Cardiac arrest is unforgiving. So without immediate care, brain damage can take place within the first 4 minutes. After 10, survival is usually not a thing. So we are very lucky that she was able to come back. It was actually a miracle. But the emergency response team didn't hesitate in doing what they needed to do. And again, I just can't imagine what that would have been like. I remember standing there holding my brother's hand and just like, I can't believe this is happening, but they did it and they saved her. And so I think it's really important to note the response time. For me, that made a difference of a tragedy and a survival story. So I could have been telling a very different story if we didn't have Lima EMS here. And it's not just my mom. Meg has come so many times for my family. My sister's disabled. They've been there for my brother. They've been there for my mother so many different times. And to see her face in all of those tragedies, and then to be out in town afterwards and to see them, and they would stop me in the grocery store and be like, how's your family doing? How are you doing? Like, cared about how I was doing after all the tragic events that my family has been through. So, I just kind of shake my head every time there's an emergency, but the friendly face of them being there and supporting me and knowing that they're going to get me through that situation and I'm not getting any stranger, I think is also something important to note about what to do in an emergency, that it's not just what they're doing for the patient, but it's what these guys do for everybody else. So that's, my thing. Every second counts. And I feel very passionate about keeping our EMS local.
I think we have one more person who wishes to
I
speak.
am not, if you don't mind, I'm not going to walk up to the front. But I want to share something with you. I've been around a long time. And I first came to Lima in 1930 when some cousins and I were having a pajama party at an aunt's house. That's how long I have known this village. And I've seen it shrink and shrink and shrink. And the very thought that we might lose our ambulance was beyond believing for me, because that ambulance crew came the day my husband had his heart attack. And it's a wonderful feeling. They were there in minutes because they were downtown and we were just out on Plank Road, about 2.5 or 3 miles from town. And it was nice for one other reason too, not only because they were there quickly, they were solving the problem quickly, but also they were people I knew. People who knew us. It's a wonderful thing to see the face of a friend when you have such a special need. So I pray that we never, never, never give up our ambulance or anything else left in Lima, because we've given up a lot. Our bank, our grocery store, many things. But to keep the ambulance is one of the greatest needs that we have. And I thank you, and thank you all for paying attention to it also.
I think at this point, we kind of concluded, at least my part of the presentation. I'm willing to take questions from up here. I'm willing to walk around and talk to people individually if you don't want to shout out and do that. But I wanted to give people an opportunity if there's any additional questions that you wanted to ask in this setting. Okay, well, I thank you all so much for coming out today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions or want more information, and I'm always willing to meet.
Thank you.
When is the next town board meeting?